ahead and get started. I want to thank you again for taking the time to join us. My name is Molly Klein. I'm the Development and Program Associate with ACT for Alexandria. And this is social media and storytelling. So thank you so much for participating. Just a quick reminder, Spring to Action will be on April 28th and registration actually closes on March 31st. So if you or organizations that might be participating haven't registered yet, please do so. It's a great opportunity. And in 2020, on average, our organizations raised an average of nearly $10,000 for their organization. So a couple of Zoom rules right off the bat. This is a webinar, so feel free to interact, to introduce yourself in the chat, to ask questions in the chat as we go along. We are going to have a Q&A session, so if you have questions that you would like to ask me or any of our panelists, please feel free to do so throughout, and we'll have an opportunity for that at the end. So another reminder is that all the resources and everything that we mentioned today is going to be included in a follow-up email at the end of the session. So don't worry if you forget things or you don't write down the links. We're also going to have a customizable content calendar that you're able to access that will be sent out, as well as a list of resources and easy links that you can follow. So don't worry, we've got you. We also have a couple of promotional announcements at the end. Great opportunities for nonprofits to really access opportunities to have their organization spotlighted. So stick around for those. And so I'd like to introduce our speakers. We're going to have notes from Chante Francois, who is our social media specialist at ACT. Unfortunately, she's not able to be here today, so I'm going to be reading out her notes. We also have Kyle Reardon, who is a graphics specialist with LoopCore, who's going to be talking about creating visuals and creating graphics. And then we have Carrie Whitlock with King Street Cats, who have the successes and challenges that her organization has faced leading up to Spring to Action. So we're going to get started right now because we have a lot of content to cover. So first things first is kind of knowing your platforms and knowing which works for each social media platform. The really important thing to keep in mind here is that you need to know your audience. So without further ado, we're going to start with Facebook. Facebook is the most commonly used social media platform, and it's a great way to connect with businesses, organizations, and the larger community. And according to analytics, 3 sentences is kind of the sweet spot when it comes to posting. Too little and it's not enough information to really get a hook with your viewers, and too much in it, your viewers are less likely to stay engaged. So different functions really include Facebook live stream, which is a great way to check in with donors and the community members throughout the day and leading up to, and to make announcements. And then Facebook analytics actually allows you to run reports on what kind of posts are getting engagement. And it's a great way to look at your content and what's really received that interest before you start creating a content calendar, which is something we'll talk about later. You also have Instagram, and Instagram has the highest audience engagement rate of any. It's a great way to tell your impact stories, and it's a great way also to kind of share your mission statement. It typically attracts younger audiences, but it's also a great way to connect with businesses and really get sponsors interested in what you're doing. It relies heavily on visual content, but analytics have found that Instagram is great for sharing impact stories, as I mentioned, and also in sharing your mission statement. This is really where you can engage people and tell stories, but the important thing to have is a visual hook, something that a high resolution graphic that's really gonna call people in to your mission and to read more. Key features are Instagram stories. This is a really great way to add, similar to Facebook live stream, to kind of update and share announcements on the day of, but also to give an inside look into what your organization is up to and some of the services that it offers. And lastly, we have Twitter. So Twitter is a great way to bring people in and to start conversations. It's really a more informal platform than the rest. So it's it's really important with Twitter to try and incorporate humors. In fact, analytics and reports have shown that posts that incorporate humor are 2 to 3 times more likely to get engagement than those that do not. And so Twitter's hashtags to generate interest around your giving day and to start conversations, but also to connect with those who are interested in your organization and to retweet things and other organizations who are interested in Spring to Action. So now that you have a background in how to use each platform, how do you actually start creating content? Well, there are some things to start considering. So building up to Spring to Action, you kind of want a different focus than when you're actually there and you're really close to the day of. So a month ahead of time, you might want to think about posting things like program updates. What services are you offering? How has it changed since the pandemic? What have you been up to, really? Another thing is conversation starters. Get the conversation started. Spring to Action shouldn't be a new thing or surprise when you get to the actual day of. It should be something that your supporters know about ahead of time. Another thing is impact quotes and stories. So really, again, sharing your services. Donors love seeing where their dollars go to. It's a really important thing to, and that emotional connection that they may have with, say, if you work with animals like King Street Cats and you share about your cats, it's really an emotional connection to those animals, and people love seeing that. Another thing is images of clients being helped. And then as it gets closer to Spring to Action, you want to think more about acknowledgements. What sponsors do you have? What donors do you have that are really helping you out? Another thing to keep in mind is posting about volunteer opportunities. Not every single person is going to have the financial capacity to help your organization, but what other ways can they help you? Is it in-kind donations? Is it fielding questions the day of? Is it volunteering to clean up the facilities? There are other ways to give, and it's really important to include those. Another thing is upcoming holidays or historical dates. So the other day was International Women's Day. If your organization works with women and things like that, how can you use that day to both elevate Spring to Action, but also your mission, and to educate donors? So thinking creatively about those sorts of things. And then spotlight your programs. Again, this is this time when you start saying, here's what $10 can buy for you. $20 to Spring to Action can buy a lunch for a child, can support a child in school, those sorts of things. And so here we have an example of how these tips actually work. And so Casa Chirlagua emphasized their success stories by posting this on Facebook, focusing on the experience of the executive director and what the funds from Spring to Action actually bought. And then on the right, you see a much simpler post, which is just kind of showing the announcements in the day of and how to incorporate those asks in those donations and to show what the success has been already. So when should you actually start creating content? So some organizations plan annual content calendars and they plug in specific links as they go, whereas others just kind of do day-to-day immediate needs sort of thing. So which one should you use? The answer is that it really depends on your organization. Some small organizations don't have the capacity to have 2 or 3 people doing this sort of thing. So you might want to do a daily social media calendar, but if you're larger, you might want to plan more on strategy. It really depends on what you have the capacity to do. And so when it comes to daily social media content, you can schedule the bulk of your data a day ahead and just think about what's coming up tomorrow that I need to anticipate. With a weekly calendar, you choose one day of the week to create your plan. It'll save you a lot of time. And you start thinking about upcoming needs. What's coming up in the next week that I need to anticipate? What events need to be announced? What can I plan for? And then the monthly social media content is really more where you stop thinking so much about creating content and more about strategy. What can you plan for? What can you incorporate anticipation? Or what can you build anticipation around, that sort of thing. And so you want to think about what are your goals and your plans, and then what can you schedule in advance. So again, as I said, this content calendar will be included in all the materials that will be sent to you in the email afterwards. And so I invite you to really take a look at this. And some of these may not pertain to you, and that's fine, and it's customizable, but you will have this at least to get started. And so what should you actually include in your calendar? Well, you want to start with topic, and topic is kind of what are you actually posting about? And this is where you're really specific. Is it early giving? Is it about sharing your stories? Is it a program launch? You know, you really, really want to be specific there. And then you have category. And category is similar, except it's much more broad. So for example, my topic might be that our new fund is accepting grant applications, but then the category would be program launch. And that's really to look at your calendar and see, okay, you know, there's a diversity of posts. You know, it's not all just about announcements or updates or impact stories. It's also incorporating services and things like that. You have author, which is pretty simple. It's who's responsible for posting. Platform, which is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all that stuff. And then you have text, which is what kind of language do you actually want to use? Are there specific words that you would want to incorporate that are kind of buzzwords at the moment? You have visual content that includes images, videos, infographics, anything that you want to use. And then you have links. What links are important? This is especially incorporate those as asks into your post, and you want to make sure that that is available to you. Then you have publishing date. So when is this actually due? So the important thing to know when creating content is consider current trends. So for example, Facebook live stream is very, very popular right now. So how can you incorporate this into your social media campaign? The other thing is that you want to be informative. Make your audience want to stop and take notice of what you're doing. If you can incorporate a graphic that has step-by-step on how to do something, it's really helpful because it makes it look easy and people can just look at it and follow those steps exactly. You also want to talk about why participating is important. What will you gain out of it? Why should you support this organization? Those sort of things. How can they help? You know, what are their dollars buying? All those things that we've gone over briefly already. The other thing is that you want to create unique and compelling visual content. This is where you can incorporate humor and really be creative with how you want to share content. So for example, this is an image of us springing to action last year. So how can you really make something different than what the rest of someone's feed is going to be? You know, the other thing is to engage with your audience and make it interactive. So you can see from this example that it's a great way to get your audience to start talking. It's a creative way to have a little bit of fun. But the other part of that that's really important is that you want to make sure you're replying. You want to make it look like an active page. So if your audience is super engaged and you're not replying or liking or commenting back, it's going to drive engagement down. So another is post frequent but limited posts. So people don't want to be bombarded, but Spring to Action, like I said earlier, should not be a surprise to anyone. So think about things like, ideally, you want to start posting a month in advance to give your marketing team time to work. But you want to start posting maybe 2 times a day when you're leading up to, and then as you get closer to the day of, start using 4 times a day, 4 times in a week, 5 times in a week, things like that. So that Spring to Action is really on the forefront of people's mind. Another important thing is to use a unique hashtag that for your campaign. So hashtags allow your team members to keep track of interactions and to make it easy for your followers to engage with your campaign. Having a branded hashtag makes it easier for analytics, but it also makes it easier to promote your events. And once people start catching on with that, you can really see how far your engagement goes. So for example, last year, King Street Cats used hashtag Saving Seniors as a great way to gain support around elderly cats. Another important thing is to promote one message throughout your campaign. So keeping in mind that the platforms do different things, as I mentioned earlier, the overall message should be the same. So you can see on the left, this was from Facebook. And like I said, Facebook is more of an ask, so it includes the link. Whereas Instagram is more of a visually based content, so it has a really engaging graphic, but then less when it comes to text. And it's really important just to know those strengths, but also have the same message, because the more that donors hear the same message, the more they're going to be encouraged to donate. So again, all these resources are going to be provided at the end, so don't worry if you don't get them all. But coordinating social media content across different platforms can be really tricky. So platforms such as Hootsuite, Buffer, Crowdfire, and CoSchedule give you the ability to coordinate those posts, but also create content and plug them into a calendar. It'll also automatically post the scheduled content to their individual platforms. So you don't have to go from Facebook to Instagram to Twitter to post everything. If you want to keep a different social media calendar, you don't like the one that I have, or you don't like the one that you're using already, Google Calendars is a great way to keep all your scheduled content in one place. And then lastly, if you want to see which social sites are sending traffic to your website, Google Analytics will run reports that show what your click rate is and everything else. And now to teach us about incorporating visual graphics, I want to introduce Kyle Reardon. He's a participant he's a graphic specialist, from LoopCore. And I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself and speak a little bit about what he does.
Hello, can everybody hear me? Molly, you can hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh, okay, great. Sorry, I logged on in a bit of a rush this morning, and I was worried that my tech wasn't running. But so my name's Kyle. I currently work with a contracting group called LoopCore. I'm on contract at Veterans Affairs, but I've also done about 8 years of nonprofit graphic design. I was with an organization called Levine Music for a long time, and I've done a lot of smaller organizations and churches and that kind of thing. So I've been doing nonprofit work for a long time. I live in Alexandria with my wife. We're big fans of ACT, and we're also big fans of Alexandria. We just really love this community. So that's why I wanted to see if there was anything that I could offer. So I decided to reach out and see if there was anything that my expertise could provide the nonprofits in this area, and now I'm here. So we're going to go ahead and talk about using graphics and visuals. And so let's go ahead and go to that first slide. So before we jump all the way in, I need you to know right now that as someone who is a professional graphic designer, bad graphic design is a real bugaboo for me. It kind of drives me nuts. So and the thing that drives me nuts even more than that is when people kind of dismiss the value of good design. So why is good design important? Your visual products are often your first impression to new donors, new volunteers, new anything. Unless they're hearing from you word of mouth or meeting you face to face, a lot of times they'll see a post, an ad, something like that. And if your graphic design is poor, well, then why would they expect your organization to not be a reflection of your graphic design? Even in those moments where you meet people face to face, God willing, when we're out and tabling or something like that, your table, your shirt, your banner will be full of graphic design. And bad visual products can imply poor practices within your organization. If you have bad visual products, it can suggest that you didn't value your visuals, which in turn suggests that you don't value your outward appearance. It can imply that you can even run the risk of implying that you're lazy or out of touch, or both. If you have graphic design, if you have a logo that hasn't changed since 1995, that could imply that your organization hasn't changed much since 1995, or you don't value the idea of evolving. Basically, graphic design can set a lot of expectations about you right away. So just as a quick example, we're all familiar with Adidas or Adidas, depending where you're from. So my question to you is, if Adidas presented the logo on the left, or if Adidas presented the image on the right, which of these companies would you be more willing to engage with? You can see the visual on the left is high quality, crisp, and it's the appropriate dimensions. On the right, it is low quality, it is pixelated, and it's been squished. I can't tell you how many times people have submitted images to me and they say, here's our logo, here's our this, here's our that. And it's a thumbnail that they've clicked and saved and sent to me, in which I literally say, I just can't use this. And the other thing is, you'll see it all the time when you, just a hot tip, please, when you resize your logo, do not just size it for the space that you're putting it in and distort it. That really makes your logo, it really, I don't want to say it disrespects your logo, but it kind of does. And anytime that you're resizing an image, there's a quick hot tip. Click on it, find the corner where you change the size, click on that, and then hold the shift key. And when you resize it, because that will keep the appropriate dimensions for what you're doing, and you won't get what we see here on the right side. All right, let's go to the next slide. Managing your message. So as we mentioned earlier, good design can set the tone for who you are and what you do. And that means making sure that your visual products reflect the organization and reflecting you as an organization. So what does that mean? That means that what you're putting out visually should be something that makes sense for what your organization does. So if you are a after-school math tutoring organization, your visual material should not be filled with sports iconography. If you are a pet adoption service, then your visual iconography should not be rigid, clean, harsh lines, and mathematical. So what exactly do I mean? So I've created this like kind of slapdash logo. If I had an organization called Puppy Love and it was for trusted dog adoptions in Alexandria, this would be a terrible logo for what we're doing. I wouldn't even use this font ever for anything that I was ever doing in this organization. If it was a after school horror movie club, then maybe that'd be much more appropriate. But there's pretty much no time in which this type of typography would be appropriate for what this organization is doing. Instead, let's look at what a good example. Here we go. Puppy Love, an organic organization that deals with animals. You want soft, you want fluffy, you want colors that we positively associate with dogs. So not red, obviously, because that seems kind of violent, but this is soft, fluffy. You kind of want to cuddle with this logo. And so this is just kind of an exaggerated example of what I mean there. So let's move on to the next slide. So one of the first things that you need to do as an organization is you need to have a style guide. So what is a style guide? So put really simply, it's a set of internal rules that guide the creation of any visual products. Just to let you know, a style guide can be as short as one page. I worked for an organization, a large organization, Levine Music, very big. Our style guide was 3/4 of a page. I've put a link into your take-home materials for NASA's style guide, and NASA's style guide is literally a book. It's like that thick, and it tells you the logo can't be this, the logo has to be this far away from this. You can only put it in this placement, never rotate it, never do this, never do that. But basically, yours doesn't have to be that meticulous. Yours can be as simple as a few of these things here. What does it include? 1 to 3 main colors. So obviously, we can even look at the Act Alexandria logo in the corner here. We've got kind of that blue and that green. Those are our main colors. And then if we wanted to say 3 to 5 tertiary colors, I would call that that deep pinkish. That would be a tertiary color. It's kind of an accent color. But the important thing about choosing colors is that any designer who would use, for example, this Spring2ACTion logo here in the corner, they would want to know the exact hex code or RGB code for that blue. So your color can't just be blue, because there are literally thousands of shades of blue. You can't say, oh, we're blue, and then someone create a baby blue logo, and then you often use a navy blue logo. If you want to have your main colors, which again, there should be 3, 2 is great. You need to know what the hex code is. And what that is if you take the color, you can cut and paste it. You can find a color. There's a million different free web tools that can tell you what the hex color is, and it'll give you a little pound sign, a little hashtag, and then like 6 letters and numbers, and that is what will tell any illustrative software exactly that color. And then there's also other things. There's CMYK, and so a color can be registered as CMYK, RGB, and a hex color, and that's just different things. It just speaks to different things. CMYK is for printing, RGB is for monitors, and a hex color is kind of a easy way to do it all. But you need to make sure that your color is consistent. And the other thing is, if you have a couple main colors and a couple tertiary colors, they can't just be colors that you like. They need to work in relation with each other. They need to be a palette. They need to fit in together with each other. And there's a resource for a really cool website called coolers.co. And what they do is they auto-generate palettes that match. You could choose a color to start, and then it'll auto-generate colors that match it artistically. And again, you want to design a style that suits your strengths. So like we were talking about before, you don't want really violent imagery if you're not a violent organization, just as a kind of a laughable example. But if your organization has a lot of photos, then you should be using those photos. Especially if they're good photos. If you're more data driven, then you should be presenting data visually. If you are, if you do a lot of math heavy lifting, then maybe your constant visual presentation should not be people smiling in an office, because 1, people can smell stock photos from a mile away, and 2, it might be confusing about what you do. I'm not against stock photography. I like stock photography when used well, but don't use it as a crutch just to put a photo somewhere. All right, and so the other thing is graphical consistency is really important. So as we're talking about Spring to Action as an example, if you have a campaign that's based around Spring to Action, every single piece of visual media that you put out in accordance to your Spring to Action campaign should have one consistent element across all of it. It should have a Spring to Action badge. Maybe everyone is wearing your t-shirt in every post that you put up about Spring to Action. Maybe you put a soft filter of your organization's main color over all the photos, and a little thing at the bottom that says, we're getting ready for Spring to Action. There has to be some kind of graphical element that is consistent. And then build that out organization-wide. You should try to do that for as long as you have that cycle of your style guide. You should try to pick an element that is repeated in stuff. So when people see this thing, they think, oh, it's that organization. All right, let's move on. So infographics, a lot of people are really interested in infographics. The most important things about infographics is readability. Your data needs to be really quickly understood. And by that, I mean that you have to remember that you know your data and you understand what your data is saying, but people on Instagram don't naturally know what your data means. They don't naturally understand what you do. And so the way that I always suggest doing that is you start with your big numbers, your most simple, hard-hitting numbers, and then you allow yourself to delineate further and further. So my wife works in an organization about affordable housing. If she was to present in an infographic all of the tiny little really minute details that she knows that are really important, all these financial indexes and all this kind of stuff to maintain her best service, and she just handed it to me, I'd be like, okay, you gave me math. But if she said, Kyle, did you know that X amount of people can't afford to live in Alexandria? Then I'm already there. And then she can go deeper into detail. So always start with your big numbers and then move downward. Make sure that your data is explained using legends, symbols, and colors. If you are very focused on having your material accessible, then that means that when people see a color, if people can't read colors, if you have a color that is important for a pie chart, you also need to include a little symbol like a star or a square, and then put that next to the data that you're explaining. So if you have a pie chart, 50% of dogs love bones. Right there, put a little square, and then at the bottom, put a square, and that would correspond with that slice, and then say 50% of dogs love bones. So that's something about visual accessibility. There are a ton of great resources for making infographics. Pictochart, Canva, Adobe Spark, all these places kind of guide you in creating different graphs, and they're all subscription based. Some of them are free, and I think they all have a paid version, but they are great ways to help you into making those things. But feel free to customize it. Otherwise, you run the risk of making a lot of samey stuff that other people using those tools are putting out because it's the template that's right in front of them without customizing it. So let's move on to a very specific example. So here's an infographic I just pulled randomly offline. You could see, oh, great. So Canva Pro is free for nonprofits. I didn't know that. That's wonderful. So here's a infographic example. This is making time for creative activities. This is something that was put out, I think, from like the government of Canada. So it's talking about adults doing creative activities. And you can see here the first number that they give you at the front. Overall, half of Canadians participated in creative activities. So we know where we're starting. Next breakdown, more than half of women pursue creative activities. Okay, so we have all adults. We're breaking it into women and men. And then we get into, you could see employees and like how, people who are either working or not working. And then from there, we break that even further into what creative pursuits they're doing. So you can see the data is clear and it moves down. And then you can also see the way that they got through accessibility was having visual linkage to each of the colors so that you can't get lost if you don't have the same color accuracy, if you don't have the same color vision as other people. So let's keep moving. So video, a lot of people love video. I studied film in school. I did a lot of video. There's a lot of things about video that's really attractive, especially today with the internet. And the first thing that whenever someone comes to me and says, we want to make a video, and again, this will sound borderline rude, but whenever someone says, we want to make a video, the first thing that I say is, why? You need to know why you want to make a video. Some people say, we want to do this. And then I say, okay, why a video? The thing about video is that it will often be some of the most involved creation that you'll do. Even easy video still takes a lot of involvement that we don't think about. And you need to think about your video in terms of objective. What do you want to get out of your video? What do you want people to do once they see your video? If you just want people to watch your video, okay, why? Like, is that really worth your organization's time? Just views. If you're talking about awareness, if you just want people to be aware, okay, that's great. I mean, you are in charge of your organization's objectives. I've had a lot of people say, we want to make a video so that people are aware of a program. And I always say, why would they watch your video to find out about this one music lesson that you're doing? Like, why wouldn't you just email them? Why wouldn't you just talk to them? What is it about a video that is really going to, stir them to action? Which is why you want to make sure that your video has a call to action. Whether or not that call to action is, I want you to care from now on, or if that call to action is, sign up now or donate now. Your video needs to have a purpose. Your video success depends on setting expectations for every product. If you're making an Instagram video and you just want to create engagement, great. Then that should be what your expectation is. You should also try to gauge how many views you're hoping to get. A lot of people are like, oh, we want like 5,000 views, and then they'll get 150, and then they'll keep making video at really low view counts. And I'm kind of like, we need to reassess our strategy. What is wrong with what we're creating that isn't getting us the result that we want? Are we simply having the wrong expectations? And then the harsh truth is that your video is just not going to go viral. A lot of people, I remember I was in one of my first jobs, and it was for donating for it was a huge nonprofit, and people we just needed unsolicited funds. We needed people to donate. And my boss would always say, this could go viral. And I would always say, I don't think anybody's this random story about a gentleman who overcame temporary houselessness is not necessarily going to go viral in the same way that a TikTok challenge is. You have to have expectations for what you're doing. And so moving on into that, video is also, the great thing about video though, is that it's no longer for people with high budgets and a ton of equipment. There are places for videos with high caliber Hollywood quality production value. Those places are things like YouTube. If you have a television spot, that's great. And there's also great places for videos that you shoot with a cell phone in the sun. The difference in production value, though, does not excuse you from strategy and pre-production. So let me say that again. The difference in production value does not excuse you from strategy and pre-production. So everyone can make a video, and even the most expensive videos can fail without proper strategy. You could put $10,000 into video, but if you don't have expectations, if you don't have a call to action, if you don't have a plan, if you don't know where you're going to release it, then why would it succeed? And the same thing is if you record a 30-second cell phone spot, but you have a plan for it, you know where you want it to go, you know what you want it to do with it, that could be way more successful than something you dump thousands and thousands of dollars into. Even the cheapest videos can be priceless tools in your tool belt. You have to know the platform. Molly gave some great information about the differences between Instagram, Twitter, and all that kind of thing. So there's differences between YouTube, Instagram Live, Facebook Live. These kind of serve different purposes, and those can fluctuate depending on your organization. So let's go to the next slide. So the video process, I'm going to try, I know I'm taking up a little too much time, so I'm trying to spin through. The video process is three things: pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production is all the planning. Where is it going? How do you film it? Who's going to be involved? What do you need? How are you going to light it? And that can be as simple as, we're going to go outside. But all the strategy of what you want, everything, that is all pre-production. Production is the actual filming. You always need to have a plan when you're filming. I can't tell you how many times someone said, let's go create some content, pull out your phone, and you say, now what? And then no one has a plan, and then you just make something that clearly is unplanned. And it turns out a little useless for you, and you don't want to waste your own time. Post-production, in Instagram setting, that can be creating hashtags, links, a great caption. And YouTube setting, that can be editing, special effects, motion graphics, links, all that kind of stuff. And also, I need you to remember, as someone who is a graphic design, video editing professional, editing is a skill. It can be learned, but it needs to be learned. So if you just have a plan of, I'm going to cut this together on my laptop in iMovie, that will be clear. That will show in what you've done. Editing is something that you hire very talented people to do. It is something that if you want to do editing, you need to take seriously. Okay, so moving on. The most important video tips are lighting. You need to make sure your subject is lit. As you can see, I am currently lit. If I turn off my lights, then, well, my background's lit, but I'm not lit. And so obviously now you're looking at my background. Lighting can be as easy as making sure that you're facing a window and the camera's facing you and the light from the window is shining on you. Never sit in front of a window and have light behind you, because it puts you in shadow. That's some of your easy hot lighting tips. You do not need to rent $1,000 worth of equipment. Sound, please, if you can, mic your subject. If you can't, don't talk while cars are going by. Don't record while there's a bunch of noise around you. Do what you can to make sure that the sound that you are recording is a sound that is most prominently featured in what's going on in that moment. Test your setup first. Anytime that you're doing something, do a quick test. It can be, if you're outside with your cell phone, give it 30 seconds, see how it looks and sounds. If you're doing a big thing, test all of it before you hit that record button. Well, I mean, you could test with the recording, but you're not going to go straight into your final. All right, rounding the corner. Molly, thank you. One final thought: when creating any visual product, be intentional. If you're creating a visual product, know why you're doing it. What's your purpose? What's your hope? What's your goal? Be intentional. And that's pretty much all that I have. Yeah, we'll be sticking around for questions and stuff later.
So I want to say thank you to Kyle. Thank you for all those great tips and examples. Now I want to introduce Carrie Whitlock with King Street Cats. Carrie, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experience.
Okay, thanks so much. I just want to thank ACT for inviting us to participate today. I've been a volunteer with King Street Cats for almost 12 years now. I started out as a caregiver, meaning I go in a few times a month to clean and feed and just help take care of the cats. And then a few years ago, when I transitioned out of my full-time work as a fundraiser, I opted to join our small fundraising team of one to help her out, to see what we could do to make sure we had enough resources. Just a little bit of background about King Street Cats. We are an all volunteer organization. We don't have any full-time staff. So just keep that in mind when I mention these tips, because I know there may be organizations out there that say, well, we don't have the staff to do this. Well, we have zero staff. So if we can do it, anybody can. So, okay, do you want to go to the first slide? So basically anyone can do this. You don't need a social media expert. I am not one. My co-fundraising partner is not one. You just have to think about the messages that we know work based on our other fundraising efforts for our organization and just apply them to Spring2ACTion. We keep it simple. we use messages that we know already resonate with donors. We're fortunate that we have plenty of images of very cute cats that we can share in, in our social media platforms. And because anyone who's coming to us obviously has an affinity for cats, and so that's going to immediately, draw them to us. But really, we try to get across the important ideas about, the number of cats and kittens we are rescuing, the why behind there are so many cats and kittens that do need rescuing. But the important thing is, just keep it simple. We don't use a lot of bells and whistles. We just stick to our core messaging and branding that we use throughout the year. I was taking a lot of notes on Kyle's presentation. I thought that was super helpful. We have found that for us, especially because we're all volunteer, we have not really tried much in the way of doing videos. We really just stick to the photos. We feel like they give us enough bang for the buck, and it just makes it easier on us that are all since we're all volunteer. If you have the capacity to do videos, I think that's great if you can, if you follow Kyle's tips. But like I said, we just try to keep it simple. And we also just try to keep our message simple, with just one or two asks. One, to participate by supporting us through Spring to Action, and two, to share our message. And sometimes it can be either or, because a lot of people may not have the resources to give right now. Next, know your audience. Which platform gives you the most traction on a regular basis? For us, it's Facebook. Instagram to a lesser degree. And we really honestly barely use Twitter right now. So you've got to look at where is your audience, where are they going to, where are you going to reach them most often? And so even if it may not, be fly in the face of like the typical thing you're seeing out there. I know right now Twitter is huge and Instagram more so than Facebook, but for us, our people are on Facebook, and that's where they resonate more. And also, this kind of dovetails along with what was shared earlier. If you don't already have a social media presence, start now and keep it up beyond Spring to Action. We use social media year round to share success stories, and often just post, fun stories about cats, so our followers feel connected to us year round. So they're used to hearing from us on a regular basis. So when we do ask for money, they know that, okay, there is a need. It's not that they're only hearing from us when we need money. Okay, next slide. Yes. So what we do is we map out a timeline for the posts to appear, and we schedule them ahead of time. This goes along with what Molly was sharing about the calendar. So, and because we're all volunteer, we can't be really doing much on the fly the day of, because most of us have full-time jobs. So, we think about our audience. When are they likely to take a break in their day to look at social media? Do they work? Are they retired? Are they parents of school-age kids who may operate more on a school schedule? So think about it, like people may tend to go on Facebook like maybe at 8 in the morning or 7 in the morning when they're starting their day, maybe on a lunch break, maybe at 3 o'clock when their kids are coming home from school or logging off of their virtual school, maybe in the evening after dinner when they're watching TV. So we schedule a series of posts to go live, throughout the day, and just with the idea that not everyone's going to see every post, and that's okay. We just need enough people to share, to see at least one post to have an impact. And we use different messages throughout the day. So, and potentially use different messages during the weeks leading up to it if you're promoting early giving. So different photos, different stories. Posts can range from anything from, our role in the community. We have a pet pantry to help provide cat food and supplies to people who can't afford it. Maybe a heart-wrenching story with a happy ending. A kitten that was rescued and needed life-saving surgery, and it's only because people like you who are reading this post, who donated, we were able to rescue. Success posts, how much has been raised so far. This is like, this is be easy enough to have it ready to go. So maybe by 3 o'clock, you can look and see, okay, where are we, in terms of how much has been raised. And then what they have to do is update the amount and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. We've already raised X dollars so far. And then you see, an example of this here. Also, you can, we like to have some sort of breaking news that we can announce that, full confession, we usually, we know what the breaking news is going to be ahead of time. But your audience doesn't have to know that. So for this instance that we used last year was, a donor generously offered to match gifts that were made after we made the announcement. So again, picture of a cute cat talking about, okay, breaking news. That's something that's going to be something to get some attention. And to be honest, we don't really have a specific strategy from year to year in terms of, because we don't have the bandwidth to look at analytics. And we've also found that in some years, it seems that different photos and stories work better than others. Like some years, it's the stories about the senior cats that really get the attention. Sometimes it's the kittens that really get the attention. So we don't aim for the perfect strategy. We just try to get the message out there with the hopes, again, of that if one of your supporters happens to see, this post, is it going to be something that's going to resonate with them? And then also keep them informed throughout the day and the next day. Like I said earlier, during the day, once, at some point when you're, look at where you are in your fundraising and let them know. And that can be something to help thank them for the people who've already given, remind them of their importance in your success, and also spur people to give if they have not yet, or whether they have or have not, ask them to share, share the social media posts, and stress how they're part of the community that's making a difference for organizations like Pink Street Cats, and they can still make an impact. And then equally critical is to post the next day with the final tally and results and another thank you, because your donors and your volunteers are going to want to know, how did we fare? So if you flip to the next slide, you can see here. So, the next morning we posted, this eye-catching photo just saying thank you. And we, every year we are humbled by how much support we receive from our community. And we just want to make sure that everybody knows how grateful we are. And so we try to, share that message and that emotion in our post. And then just a few other things, just, think about your communications in the weeks leading up to Spring to Action. Think about, and this could even be the months leading up to Spring to Action. Luckily, with the Spring to Action being in April, all of us have made it through the year-end crunch of fundraising. So it's kind of a good sweet spot for another campaign. But just, think about what you're putting on social media and any other communications you're doing, such as email, or if you do actually hard copy mailings, in the weeks leading up to it. So we just try to make sure we allow enough space from our other fundraising efforts, so it doesn't seem like all we're doing is asking for. Occasionally throughout the year, we run special campaigns, when for instance, recently we took in some cats that needed extremely expensive surgery. And so we did a very soft appeal for that through social media, but we made sure, okay, that has to happen by X date because we need space between that and Spring to Action. And we also use our website and our email list to publicize Spring to Action. Some people still respond better to email. We don't do hard copy mailing for Spring to Action, but we just really rely on email and our website, and of course the social media. Just because, again, maybe someone has a super busy day, they may not be on social media at all that day. They may forget that that's the day that they're supposed to be giving. So maybe if they're on their email, they see that, and that will trigger that. Also, enlist your supporters' help. Don't be shy. we ask everywhere for people to share our message on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You know, in our email ask, we mention it in the body of the email and through the icons at the bottom of the page. In the email message that your supporters will get directly through the GiveGab platform, we make sure in the email there is something that enables them to share the message to say, hey, I just donated and supported King Street Cats. Can you, I want to share this with you. Hopefully you will consider it. And then also, we have an amazing group of volunteers. Use your volunteers, ask your volunteers to help share your message, whether they're doing it through social media or through mail, and just ask them to, add a personal message, so someone, like I would tell my friends, hey, I've been volunteering with this organization for almost 12 years. It's extremely important to me. Would you consider? So also be realistic. In addition to some of the things I mentioned already, such as our limited bandwidth to look at analytics and things like that, think about where you are as an organization and be realistic as to what you can do. I think the free agent fundraiser aspect of Spring2ACTion is a fantastic idea. I've used it in some of my paid fundraising work in the past, but we've tried it with our groups, and our groups didn't quite get it, to be honest. And so we stopped putting energy towards that and realized, okay, we just need to keep it simple, go where our donors and volunteers are and what they're willing to take on and understand. So we just, really keep our asks simple. And then also put yourself in the donor's shoes. Don't ever forget how you feel as a recipient of a fundraising community. And remember that people who support you are very likely to support other organizations who also may be participating in Spring2ACTion. We're fortunate in Alexandria to live in a very giving community. So we try not to inundate our audience too much while still trying to get your message out there. So listen to feedback. Some years we hear from donors, I'm tired of hearing from you. So we may scale back a little bit. Next year we may hear like, hey, where are you guys on Spring2ACTion? So you just got to kind of look at it from year to year and strike the right balance, which leads me to my final point, debrief afterwards. So learn from your efforts. Take a cursory look at what posts work best in terms of messaging and timing, et cetera. Don't get so bogged down in the weeds, because you never know what's going to be going on in the world that day. It could be, hopefully on April 28th, it's not going to be some crazy news day where everyone's glued to their TVs and not looking at their social media, but you never know. So if some year you don't do as well, try to figure out why, or some year you do great, try to figure out why. But again, don't get lost in the weeds. The last thing I will say is just follow other organizations to get ideas. It may not help in the current year's Spring2ACTion, but you can always learn lessons for next year. So I know I follow a bunch of organizations, and I also give to a number of organizations. And so when I get their communications about Spring2ACTion, I look to see, well, and would this be something that might resonate with our audience? And so just, keep that in mind, try to learn from what others are doing, and just try to keep improving from year to year. So.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And we had so much good content. So unfortunately, we don't have as much time for questions, but I'm going to give it over to Brandy and let her share a couple of the questions that we've had coming in. And don't forget to submit your own as well.
Okay, Molly, so one of the questions is it advisable to create a highlight on Instagram for Spring2ACTion stories? So if any of our Instagram experts out there can give some advice on that.
Highlights as in, did it give any more context? I guess as far as sharing stories, it's always a good idea to share stories. A lot of times your followers are going to share your content and things of that nature. And it's really important to share those because it's free advertising, and it shows that you have a further reach than just your own organization. It can also be a way of supporting and connecting with other people, because if your supporters see that someone else that they know is supporting you, they're going to be more interested in looking. And that's where you really attract new donors, by sharing that content.
Great. This question, Kyle. Kyle, can you remind us what website you recommended for the different color styles?
Yeah, there are a few that are available. The one that I specifically mentioned is called coolers.co, C-O-O-L, I think O-L. I provided a link that Molly's going to send out. But you could even just type in free color palette generator, and you'll get some that are really helpful. And they'll have the little, at the bottom of each color, I'll have like a little hashtag FF28205, and that'll be like this particular lime green color and that kind of thing. But yeah, so they're abundantly available, and there will be one in the material.
Great, thank you. Okay, Carrie, this question's for you. Can you give a realistic amount of time that you and your team put towards your social media activity?
To be honest, it's kind of hard for me to estimate. So the woman that I work with, who really heads up all of our fundraising work, she has a very demanding full-time job. So this is something she does, in her free time, which is, very limited, because she also volunteers at the shelter in other ways as well. So just to give you an idea, so far this season, in addition to, me participating in these webinars and just trying to gain tips and tricks, we have had, my partner and I have had one hour-long phone call. We'll probably have another hour-long phone call in another couple of weeks. And then she'll probably spend, I would say, less than 8 hours, putting together, okay, here's like mapping out during the day, like here's what I think we want to say at 8 o'clock, at 2 o'clock, etc. And then, working to get that scheduled to be posted on our different platforms. So it's really, it's very minimal, simply because, number one, I don't have the capacity, or I don't have the ability to update our social media platforms. And so it's more, just thinking of a good strategy ahead of time, and then putting it out there. So it's very minimal time.
Great. Thank you so much. I want to thank our panelists again for being a part of this. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for questions. And as promised, I just want to share very briefly. I know that everyone has places to be, so just being mindful of everyone's time. We have a couple promotional events that are going on. ACT is currently looking for video content for our promotional video for Spring to Action. And there will be more details in the email that's coming up. So if you're interested, stay tuned. And then the Alexandria Times is also offering big discounts on Spring to Action print ads in the month of March, April, and the first week of May. And they're running a special promotional on April 22nd. And so last but not least, thank you to our wonderful sponsors, without whom we could not be able to do all the work that we do for Spring to Action. And thank you all for participating and spending your morning with us. Happy Wednesday, and have a great day.